Welcome to the party, pal! Now, even though I'm more of a Hanukkah guy, I do try to watch a few Christmas movies every holiday season. And one of those that I love to watch is Die Hard. According to scientists, it is the best Christmas movie ever made. In keeping with the holiday spirit, in this video I'm going to go through several scenes in the screenplay for Die Hard line by line to show you what we as screenwriters can learn from how the script handles characterization and action. I am Carl T. Rogers, the story philosopher, a writer and director, teaching you how to elevate your screenwriting with visual storytelling. Now, as we dive into this, I want you to keep in mind that this was written in 1987. It was based on a book, and it is a shooting script. If you're wondering, before we jump in, how to differentiate between a shooting script and a spec script, then first, maybe you should watch this video up here where I go through a shooting script and point out how the formatting is different from a spec script, especially nowadays. But as we dive into the script for Die Hard, keep those kind of elements in mind. First of all, that it's a shooting script, so it's going to look a little different. And especially that the way we write scripts nowadays are going to be different. Things are a little bit more novelistic in this screenplay, especially since it was adapted from a novel. And so the kind of voice and style is a little different than I would recommend you to write today, especially if you're doing a spec script and not a shooting script. So even though there are so many differences from how things were done decades ago, as a story and as that story is executed on the page, there's still a lot that we can learn. Die Hard, screenplay by Jeb Stewart, based on the novel Nothing Lasts Forever by Roger Thorpe. Second revised draft, October 2nd, 1987. All right. Like I said, this is a shooting script, and you can tell because it's got all these scene numbers, and it's got very specific camera angles in some of the slug lines here. So this is the first scene that I wanted to start with, is when John McClane first gets picked up at the airport. Interior, LAX, evening. McClane, wearing his wool topcoat and carrying a huge FAO Schwartz stuffed animal and his hang-up bag, comes down the American Airlines ramp with the businessman from the plane. Remember, bare feet, 10 minutes, Merry Christmas. That's another reason you can tell it's a shooting script, because it's got this continued, which we don't put in spec scripts. Yeah, Merry Christmas. Businessman moves down the ramp and is lovingly greeted by his family. McClane watches, moved by the sight, then looks around the waiting area, just on the chance his family might be waiting. Instead, he spots a thin, gangling black kid, William, in an ill-fitting chauffeur's uniform. As he waits, he beats out a rhythm on a card with J. McClane printed on it. McClane pauses in front of him. So I really like this moment here when we show this businessman getting greeted by his family, lovingly greeted by his family. Some people say that you shouldn't use adverbs in your screenplay. I think that's dumb. It's I wrote an article about this as well, kind of how to polish your screenplay, and how the rule is not really like not to use adverbs, but is actually kind of a different thing entirely. It's a good way to juxtapose the moments showing these two characters, and also this beat of seeing the family and him wanting his family to be there is something that's very visual, and it resonates with the themes of the film. However, nowadays, if we were going to write this, all of this would be very spaced out, okay? Because right now we've got several important beats, and they're all here in these 7 lines. And this is like this huge block of text where this should really be spaced out, so that kind of this should be one beat, potentially. Like, you know, we see the setup of the businessman getting greeted by his family, and then we see his reaction to it. That's a particular moment. And then him looking for the same thing, that's a particular moment. And then the reveal of William, then that's like the 3rd moment. But right now, these are all kind of compressed into one moment. And so if we were going to write this nowadays using conventional spec formatting, I would probably recommend to do it this way. Now, me giving this analysis and these recommendations is not trying to say that I know better than Jeb Stewart. This is just me providing perspective from kind of future, looking backward into how they wrote back then and what we can learn from it now, using the conventions of screenwriting that are more popular nowadays and what industry executives are expecting to read. Okay. Another thing that I would say is that he says waiting area might be waiting, I would probably want to have a different word there. Then looks around the waiting area just on the chance his family might be there, or might just on the chance his family is there, or something like that, instead of saying waiting again. But once again, these are very small things. The main thing I would want to do if I was going to rewrite this in the modern day is kind of break up these beats. This is some nice dialogue here. So starts walking. Don't you take this? Do I? I don't know. I never been picked up by a limo before. That's good because I've never driven one before. So I really like this exchange, and I like how they just very briefly use the parenthetical here. It doesn't say he stops walking and turns, because that would just be an action line. But him just stopping, that's, if we have to include it this way, then this is the best way to do it if we're using it that way. And if you want to learn more about how parentheticals are used nowadays, then I've got a video on that you can look at right up here. Now let's go to the next scene. Interior, limousine, dusk. Now, if I remember right, okay, so this was evening. So now this is dusk. Now, probably one of the reasons why they decided to include the specific time of day instead of just saying day or night, because that's normally what we do now, is say either day or night, unless the specific time of day matters. And in this case, it actually does matter, because if you remember in the film, we're seeing the sunset, and the time of day matters for the film to take place, since it all takes place over one afternoon and then evening, up until the next morning. Glenn and William both sit in the front seat as the black limo turns off the Santa Monica Freeway and heads north towards Century City. Now, this is something that is only going to make sense if you live in LA, especially if you live in LA back then. So, I'm not sure why this was included in this way, unless there was a particular type of scenery that needed to be shown. Now, I know we do see in the movie, some typical LA, skylines and stuff. But nowadays, especially if I was talking about an area that most people don't know about, or not everyone would know about, I probably wouldn't be this specific, unless it was mattered to the story. I like this huge toy animal sits in the back seat. I would say we could even make this stronger by having a more specific verb with sits. You could say something like the huge toy lounges in the back seat, the huge toy waits in the back seat. There's probably a lot of other better options out there, but just something to give a little more emotional information that goes along with the visual information, so that they're combined rather than just it sits. Fast food wrappers, Taco Bell. This was a little bit of detail that I don't think was in the film. I think there is a tiny little moment here, but it's not focused as much on a particular product placement. But I haven't watched the film in at least a year, so I could be wrong about that. I do like this moment here, because that helps kind of place the film specifically in Christmas, which is one of the reasons why this definitely is a Christmas film. There's a really good video done by The Take where they explain all the reasons why Die Hard actually is a Christmas film, and I'll leave a link for that down in the description if you want to watch that. But notice that they don't name the particular song in here. Right? Now, the writer probably was thinking of a particular song, but they didn't have to mention it here. And that's actually really good, because that gives the production team and the director the freedom to pick the song that the writer wanted, if they're able to get the rights to it. But if not, then they can go with something else, because it matters enough to the story that it's rap and that it's Christmas. It doesn't have to be a particular song that has a particular line of dialogue or things like that. Also, it's kind of like how, emphasizing that it is Christmas music. Nowadays, I would probably use italics instead of an underline, if it was really specific that it needed to be said that way. But either way, it works. And this kind of thing is not used very often in the screenplay, so we can get away with it. Now, notice here, this is another sign that this is a shooting script, because this slug here is actually, he looks out the window, his POV, right? So it's like showing this camera angle very specifically. That's something we probably would not do here. Otherwise, nowadays, especially for spec, we could, we just say looks out the window and say he sees or he watches, convertibles with Christmas trees in their back seats, 69 degrees, all that kind of thing. We wouldn't have to have this right here. It is clear that Christmas LA style is a foreign commodity he could live happily without. Now this is something that I think is kind of an interesting character moment, but I think it would be better nowadays to also include something about his visual reaction to it. Right now it's only implied, and I would want to make that a little more clear, just so that someone can pick up on that while they're reading through it quickly. Because this gives up and grins is a reaction to all of his dialogue up here, which is really good. But showing his reaction, like McClane shakes his head, semicolon, it's clear LA style Christmas is a foreign commodity. Something like that would be even more visually clear. Okay, this is good. We've got once again, using the Rileys the right way. Married. She live out here as of 6 months ago. You live in New York? You're nosy, you know that? See, this is a really good exchange of dialogue, because we're finding out information, but it's not in an expositional type of way that kind of would be annoying to an audience. So this is really good. You've got, and it's also good because it's character driven. It's based in how the character works. And William is somebody who's very talkative. I think in the film he actually says, used to be a taxi driver, so people expect chit chat. I think is the line in the film. But he says something like something similar here. So maybe they improv'd it a little bit. But it totally makes sense because his character is someone who wants to investigate, wants to find out more, whereas McClane is very closed off and does not want to give up more information, But because of this, we get to reveal information about McClane, information about William, and also not just that information about them, but also what their characters are like, personality-wise. And that is just so good. That is just so good because we're getting the story information that we need, while we're also getting character information in a way that's entertaining and relatable, because we all know somebody who's like this, and we all know somebody who's like this, and a lot of people in the audience is going to identify with one or the other of these people, So that is another reason why this is such a good scene, and it works on so many levels. And that's what you really have to have when you're at this level of excellence with your screenwriting, is you have to be able to do all of these things at once in your scene. Some people are really good about coming up with the story idea. Some people are really good about showing that idea. But if you want to be able to create a script that's actually going to sell and attract interest by people, you've got to be able to do all of those things at one time, like Jeb Stewart does in this script. Also, like in this scene, that so much of this dialogue, we just kind of let it play out, and all of this kind of survives on their delivery. There's not much in here about how they deliver it, which gives the actors freedom to kind of play that the way they want to, and to work with the director to get the most nuance out of it, which is really good, because that's what you want to do. This is just a blueprint. You have McClane giving up. You have William being very to the point. I don't even think you need to have this. You don't even need to say this, because this sentence is to the point, right? You don't need to have that here in the parenthetical, right? And then we have a little bit here. McClane grins. He likes William if he's direct. All of these things just kind of show how, and even this ending line, the characters are going after these different goals, and they're kind of clashing in that way, but the audience is still enjoying it. The only other thing I would change in the scene, just on the page wise, is probably take this part out. So we don't really need that, it's kind of redundant. And then to switch this with this, so that the dialogue all goes together, and then we end on the visual reaction of McClane. And so that's like a good way to button up the scene before we move on to the next scene, okay, with Sergeant Powell. And so that is the last thing I'm going to be looking at in this script. And especially because I want to examine this scene to see if we can figure out why this was not included in the final film. All right. And so if you've seen Die Hard before and you've not read this scene before, then I want you to kind of in the comments let me know below what your opinion is and why you think they left this out of the final cut of the film. and I'm gonna read the whole thing. Okay. Interior: Los Angeles Police Station. Night. A miniature Christmas tree with blinking lights sits on a desk of Sergeant Al Powell, 30s, a man who's had enough experience to know how bad it can be out there. He speaks in a low tone to the telephone. Powell, defensively. Yeah, honey, don't go crazy. Listening, then. I know you're pregnant. I know you get cravings. I didn't say I wouldn't buy them. I just said I wish you'd buy them in big boxes. Suddenly, Powell's miniature tree is knocked off its side, and a handgun goes spinning across the desk into his lap. He looks up to see two cops trying to subdue a struggling suspect in front of his desk. Cop number 1 looks up at Powell and grins. Don't worry, Al, it ain't loaded. Powell, to the phone. I gotta go. Powell hangs up and puts the heavy firearm on the desk as the two cops shove the suspect into a chair in front of him. Cop number 2 stares at the suspect and points at Powell. Sergeant Powell's a very deadly man with a handgun, so don't try anything or he might kill you. By accident. The two cops laugh. Powell ignores them and expertly rolls in a sheet of paper into his main weapon, the typewriter. Powell, to suspect. Full name, last name first. Okay. That is an interesting scene. It kind of gives us an insight into Powell's character, and especially his character arc that goes on later in the film. Now, I want y'all to, now that we've kind of read through it real quickly, it's a short scene. They probably shot this. So, tell me in the comments, why do you think they left it out? It is part of his arc. It's a short scene. It helps establish who he is and what his problem is. Why do you think we don't have it? The first time we meet Powell in the film is later on when he's actually buying all the snacks at the gas station. Why don't you think they included it? So, my guess is they thought it was redundant to have both of those, and we really don't need to have it because we find out a lot of this information later on. We find out this information later on through the dialogue that Powell and McClane have over the phone as they continue to bond, and McClane is kind of asking them, like, how did you end up on the desk? You seem like a good guy, all that kind of stuff. And so if we gave this all away at the beginning, it might kind of kill the tension, or it might make us less interested in their conversation later on. I'm sure that they probably shot this scene, and then when they showed like a rough cut to everybody, they were like, we might not need this scene. And that's perfectly okay. Is there anything I would change in this scene, assuming that we did keep it in? Well, I'm not sure. Maybe some of the parentheticals here, we probably don't need them because we can kind of tell what the subtext is based on what the what's going on in the dialogue on the phone. I'll probably change that. Another thing that I find a little hard to believe is that 2 other officers would be bringing a struggling suspect into the room and him not hear it before this happens and not look up. It almost seems like it's a surprise that this happens. And unless he was in some tiny cubicle, which I don't think would be the case, it seems unlikely that this would happen and him not know what was going on. Now, he might still be surprised by the gun flying around or something, but he would still know that they're in the room and still know that something's happening. However, I do really like this line right here. Powell ignores them and expertly rolls in a sheet of paper into his main weapon, the typewriter. Like, that is such a great way to juxtapose what's going on with the actual weapon here and how that ties into his character arc. And it's also a very funny line. Like, this provides some levity to the person reading the script while letting them know who Powell is and what he's about. Expertly rolls in a sheet of paper into his main weapon, the typewriter. Like, oh, I just love that line. I love that line. And that's the kind of wordplay that I challenge you all to be able to add to your own screenplays. Okay. Now that's the 3 scenes from Die Hard that I wanted us to look at. If you want me to do more of Die Hard, then let me know what other scenes I should analyze, whether they're Christmassy or not. And if you want to read the rest of this, I'm going to leave a link for it down in the description. And also, if there's another film you want me to do, then also let me know in the comments below. All right. So that was an in-depth look at Die Hard. If you want to learn about how we kind of do things nowadays, in contrast to how they wrote in the 80s, especially in ways that you can leverage visual storytelling to jumpstart your screenwriting career, then I've created a free training called How to Launch Your Screenwriting Career, and you can click up here and watch it. And if you enjoyed this video, I've also done a similar breakdown of the opening scene of Alien from 1979. You can watch that right here.